Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Heather George. Today, Byron Biggie and Tim McManus will be covering year-end processes. Byron will be presenting the material, and Tim will play the role of a new controller or member of an accounting team and will be asking questions along the way. Our hope is that you will leave this presentation today feeling more educated and prepared for year-end. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Let me switch my mouse is being a little tricky. Sorry about that. First, your lines are muted. Please use the Q&A for any questions that you have, and we will do our best to address as many as we can. Second, we will be recording this session, and it will be made available in our Learning Center on our website after the presentation. Lastly, if you have any questions that arise after the presentation or the presentation itself inspires any ideas of topics that you'd like us to cover in the future, please send an email to info@aitbusiness.com. That email will come to me, and I will personally ensure that all inquiries are routed to the appropriate member of our team to assist. And if you're working with another Infor partner, we'll be sure to loop them in as well so that they can best support you. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'd like to welcome Byron and Tim to the presentation. Byron, if you'd like to get started and share your screen.
Sure. So thanks for joining us and being a part of our presentation and our discussion today. So today we're going to be talking about the very exciting area of year-end processing for those of us on the accounting side of the business, right? This is good stuff. And so we're going to be discussing steps that you need to be mindful of at various levels across the system. So our agenda today is really to, as we get started, to include you as our part of our SyteLine family in getting ready to say goodbye to 2020. I think everybody's eager to put this one in the books and move on to hopefully a better and brighter 21. And so given that it's been such a different year, unusual year, we know you've got lots of demands on your time and lots of areas you're focused on, right? So you've got different things you're doing across the business, maybe budgeting and forecasting even for next year. And now all of a sudden you got to kind of remember and realize like, oh yeah, I got year end coming up. So you may have some questions about that. So, and that's really where this was born out of. Tim and I discussed this kind of stuff regularly, and we thought, why not just expand the conversation and include others in it in the community that perhaps might benefit from it, and just there might be some little pearls along the way that could help you in your journey. So anyway, as we go forward and you look forward to year end, you might have questions like, oh yeah, what are those steps again that I need to do? Where do I need to go for those? What's the timing of that stuff? Was there some that I had to do before others, or is there a certain order? And then my favorite is where's the checklist, right? Does somebody have a checklist that you can send me just so I make sure I got all the bases covered? So what we really just want to do is come alongside you guys and hopefully provide answers and some tools that could assist answering some of those things. We'll do really a survey, an overview of the process, and go through the checklist, and hopefully that can just serve as a point of reference for you in the future and give you some peace of mind regarding this area. So to our first question, where's the checklist? Is there a checklist? Where do I go? What do I do first? So not surprisingly, yes, of course, we do have a checklist. We've got actually a couple of documents at AIT that could be helpful for you in this area. This is just the actual more checklist version of it. But yeah, so these are steps that you're going to want to be mindful of and pay attention to across the system, especially at year end. And so Tim, if you're on the line with us, what I thought we would do is, you had kind of asked for a checklist, and here's a list that can serve as a good starting point for you. As a side note, we're happy to provide this to any of you that would like this document, and it can serve as a starting point. You can add your own notes and comments and reminders to it as you choose. But
yeah, thanks.
But I thought, really, to provide you with a checklist is one thing, but on the surface, you might look at it and go, wow, do I really have to do all these things at once, and which ones come first, and how do I kind of attack this thing and manage it? And so what I thought we'd do is just kind of focus on it by section here, and we have the top part kind of divided into things that are not only required steps to do, but also the timing is critical, or they're what I call time sensitive, right? So these are things we want to prioritize, sure we do first, and so that's really this top section of the list, right? So we're going to kind of divide this up pieces here, so it's a little more hopefully understandable and digestible for you. And so these are things that are, I'm calling more time sensitive, right? Meaning that we want to make sure to do these steps, these processes, before new transactions occur in the system for the new year, right? So we want to get a nice clean cutoff on these things. And so we will go through these, we'll touch on each one kind of by area or module, right? So for accounts receivable, for example, there's certain things we want to make sure to do, certain things on the payable side, payroll, et cetera. So we'll touch on each of those. And then after that, the next section will be things that are generally required, but not as sensitive from a timing standpoint. So I'm kind of, describing them as not time sensitive. And so we'll touch on those as well, things like 1099 form reporting and printing W-2s, things like that. So we know perhaps generally that we need to do those things, but the timing of it is somewhat flexible, right? Not things you have to do on day one or certainly the last day of the year type of thing. And then last but not least, this section at the bottom, this larger section, is areas that we typically just consider at this time of the year that are more of a housekeeping or maintenance kind of nature, right? So these are things that at various levels of the system speak to things like, record retention, data retention, detailed transactions, things like that. So it's just a good point in time to think about those things, consider them, and see if there's anything that you need to do in those areas. But we really just want to make you aware of it. So hopefully we'll walk you through this in a way that you get not only hopefully just you get something more than just a checklist, right? So we want you to walk away with more than just this checklist Byron gave you, and actually have an understanding of what this stuff is doing, as you run it. As a side note, Tim, just a reminder, you have your My Folders option, right, in CSI SyteLine. So if you like to have a real handy checklist as a point of reference in SyteLine, you could take a few minutes and just build out a little list of folders and shortcuts for you that could serve as a readily available reminder, so you don't have to kind of hunt for that spreadsheet or.
You could set that up just for the accounting group or for different role or something. But yeah, you can't upload those menus, but once you put that in, that's, you'll have that every year, right?
Yeah. And so, if you want to take, 10, 15 minutes and add those in, it could prove to be helpful. And the nice thing is too, is you can, if you have permission, you can copy that to another user's menu, basically. So you could tell, a counterpart or someone on your team, hey, by the way, I put that checklist we were talking about. I built it and I stuck it on your menu last night. When you log in, it'll be there.
Got it.
So just kind of a nice point of reference. Okay. So the first area that we're going to hit, right, those top ones on the list, these guys here largely kind of fall under kind of a heading or a focus, if you will, of resetting our year-to-date accumulators, right? So these are things across the system, and so on an accounts receivable basis, right? Just as a reminder, the system's recording and accumulating values at dollar and quantity level, et cetera, across the system as transactions occur. So just as a reminder, on the customer record, for example, we're tracking things and accumulating things like this, both at a period to date, year to date. Here's another one, right, at a salesperson level. So here's just a reminder of where these things kind of live and sit. And so when you get to the first one on the list, this AR period year-end procedure that says, well, and as a side note, each little step has a nice little description summary at the top. So it gives you a really good example and a framework reference, so you know what to expect and what data points it's going to hit. Which would be those ones we just looked at. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to do. The nice thing is really these steps, and as we go forward, you might say, hey, these actually look pretty familiar to me, because I think don't I run this at month end too? And so the nice thing is, yeah, a lot of these are familiar. So it's not a drastically different process at year end. It's just kind of a few additional supplemental steps. And so in this case, right, we would run this utility in a different mode or a different option in this instance and say, well, yeah, at this moment in time, I want to hit not only period to date, but in this case, I do want to hit year to date, and I would reset those as well. Right? So actually pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We're going to also reset things like item values at different cross-reference settings. So as you know, the system tracks item cross-references to a customer item, and likewise the accumulators at that level, right? So we can report on transactions at either our item level or the customers if needed, and likewise on the vendor side, right? So our item versus the vendor item reference, right? So we're accumulating things at that level as well. And so this next step is gonna reset those values, right? So this one's gonna go out and again, it's going to be similar to what you run at a period end, but it's going to reset those year-to-date values based on what you choose here.
So one of these things we're talking about this, most of these actual utilities you can put on the background queue, and I guess if you're running a calendar year, you could do it, first day of the month or last day of the month or something. But if you got like a 4 or 5 where your counting periods are on, different days willy-nilly, it doesn't work so well. But Yeah, I don't know anyone who's actually put these on a background queue, even though you can. I think people like to be sort of deliberate and on these things.
That's a good, and I mean, it's nice to know you have that as an option. But again, I guess I'm just thinking, I guess, out of habit, following my checklist and making sure I've got all the bases covered, doing it distinctly, But yeah, it's nice to know that you can put that on the background if you want. So as we continue, right, we're just going through the system, hitting these accumulators, these totals, and likewise at the vendor level, right, payments, purchases year to date, et cetera. So we're going to reset those guys, and that's what's accomplished with this procedure here. All right, gives you a nice little summary at the top, what this utility is going to do and fields it's going to hit. So just so you know.
So one question, what if you didn't do it, or what, why are you doing this? Like, is that going to affect like reporting, or is it going to affect anything financially, or?
Yeah, so if we go back, let's go back one slide, like to something like this, right? I mean, so, which is why I wanted to make sure you understood the data points that it's affecting, right? So, so this is the call it potential risk, if you will, that could be affected. I wouldn't say it has a financial impact, right? It's not going to affect your general ledger, but yeah, reporting and it certainly could, and people doing inquiries coming in here to reference these data points, it could be off.
Got it.
So yeah. So best practices to do these ideally before new transactions occur, right? That's first prize. If heaven forbid you miss a day or whatnot, you could run it and your totals could be off, a day or so. So that's obviously not ideal, but. And then in addition to that, as a fallback, there are a couple of utilities that could help in this respect, more on the AR and AP side. They're helpful in recalculating some of those values if they do get off, but not as much on the inventory side. The inventory side is really I guess you'd say, more rigid or strict side of things, where you get more of a one-time window of opportunity there. Okay. So this was our year-end, or our AP year-end guy that we looked at. So we know what that's hitting. If it pertains to you, payroll, right, not surprisingly, has totals that it's accumulating at different levels. So for a employee, we want to make sure to reset those guys as well. That's what this one will do. It also, I think, rolls forward vacation hours and PTO balances there. There's one at under a heading that they call human resources, which hits some of these accumulated, likewise on the more on the PTO side of things, I believe. And so if that's something you're running, if payroll's something you're running in the system, you want to make sure to look at those things as well, and make sure you got clean cutoffs there on the payroll side. On the inventory side and items side, of course, right, we're likewise tracking a lot of these totals, right? So as you probably recall, on the item master, there is a place you can go here on the sales tab that gives you a quick look at totals over time. And so we want to reset those guys, as well as at the item warehouse level, it'll track these sets of totals as well. And so these are the various kind of data points that we're hitting with our next step here, which is to reset those values with set item warehouse, period to date, year to date. Right. So this is a utility in the system, and you can say, well, I run it at month end, and it is. And so, the beauty of it is, year end just represents one additional incremental step, right, of saying, in this case, yeah, I do want to reset year to date fields in this case. Okay.
Cool.
So fixed assets, as a reference, we know, right, as we're generating and posting depreciation, we're accumulating that as well. And we got a nice total as a reference here as the year goes on. But towards the end of the year, we want to go ahead and reset that with this procedure here, fixed asset year end. So tells you what it's going to do. The depreciation year to date field is zeroed out. It's pretty straightforward, but again, you just want to make sure you run that before you generate and post depreciation for the new year.
So Byron, on all that stuff, it's really, you got to pick a time when everyone's done with transactions for the period or the year, and before they start transactions in the next period or year, right?
Exactly. And so, traditionally I'm calling that at like in this case, December 31st or New Year's Day, right? For lack of a better example, I kind of used to think of this as my New Year's Day checklist, right? So I make sure I do these things before, Monday morning or whatever, and people are back in and on the system. So this is my red hot checklist. I got to make sure I get to these things in a timely fashion. And the other items I have a bit more flexibility on the timing, but.
And if you were some other fiscal year or fiscal period besides calendar, it could be January 4th or something else versus 12/31, right?
Exactly. Just like your period to date, or your period, closing routine, you would have a similar checklist for month end, which is actually, as we said, contains a lot of these similar items, and go through that based on your fiscal calendar as well. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of where we've been, right? We wanted to make sure we hit the hot list. So we got to take care of those items and make sure they're done quickly. And so back to our list here, right? These are kind of the next section. So these are items that we know generally I gotta get to these, but I have a little more time, a little more flexibility in them. So we'll take a look at these. They're basic things, not surprisingly, like 1099 form printing. So, right, nobody runs those the first day of the new year or even the first week of the new year, right? Typically takes some time, so you have time to do that. If we've advanced the period, though, and run some of those reset utilities that we just looked at, when I come now to a step like this, I would want to just make sure to check this box. It says, in this instance, I now want to use what is now last year's total, right? Based on the current position I'm in, I want to now use last year's number. So pretty straightforward, pretty basic. There's other things we could talk about with 1099 and when and if you get there. If you have questions about it, we can help with that. I don't know that it warrants a whole lunch and learn kind of topic on it, but there's things you can do to help adjust that 1099 amount. If you need to update and correct that, there's things that can help you with that as well. But anyway, so just a reminder, you want to run your 1099s. Likewise, your W-2s, right? So make sure you have a clean cutoff and your W-2s generated if you're running payroll on the system as well. And so this next one, changing the current fiscal year, at some point you obviously want to tell the system you're in the new year. I have this step under the required other, or what I call like the more flexible side. And this one's kind of interesting. It's either as I'll call it as flexible or as rigid as you want it to be. And just as a reminder, it's based on your preference and your setting or tolerance, if you will, for days forward and backward in the system. So I'll give you a couple examples. In this case, you can see where this setting lives. As a reminder, it lives on the general parameters form, and it is where the system gets the fiscal year that it's in right now, right? So the current designated fiscal year is there, and then in addition to that, we can set a tolerance value, if any, that we want to allow people to transact forward and back of that both year and the accounting period, as we'll see in a moment. So you may remember these settings and setting them up maybe back in the beginning, or somebody mentioned it, or that kind of thing. But just a reminder that these come into play. So based on this example, if I'm saying 0 days, and I'm saying I really have a very minimal tolerance for people running outside of the current period, right? Basically, I'm saying nobody, everybody stays in that current lane, and nobody is able to step out of it.
And by stepping out of it, something like I go to my PO receipt screen and I try to backdate something, or
exactly, or invoice something, or payables, or really across the system. But I'm basically saying, me as controller, I don't want people getting creative and remembering, oh, I forgot to do this last week, so I'll just backdate it. Right. And then you or I on the management side is kind of, chasing moving numbers. And so, right. So based on this, I would say, perhaps if I'm set like this, I probably want to make sure to do this right away with my other like required steps and make sure I cover this one quickly. Right. Whereas, as an example, over here, if I'm set to something like this, and I say, no, I do have more flexibility, and I will allow the users a broader margin, if you will, right, in which to operate. So I will allow them to go up to, in this case, right, 10 days forward. Then I have a little more time, and it's not a call it New Year's Eve, a New Year's Eve exercise, right? I can deal with it when I get back into the office.
Yeah, so, some of those things, like particularly backward, a lot of times at the end of the month, we haven't really finished billing or anything like that. The last shipments are out there, and we actually want to go and run our invoices, capture them in last period, but, it's the next period. We want to do that. And also, Byron, this is kind of a general parameter. You have the ability to take individuals and give them override permission to post forward and backward, like maybe some people you want to have do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was just going to say this is probably part of a broader conversation and discussion, right? Because there's different ways that you can handle this. So we're not trying to really address every nuance of the equation here, but in this case, just a reminder, right, that it's a function of those settings as you've chosen to set them up, right? So it will need to be addressed as either as urgently or flexibly as you've established. But yeah, you can, within these, there's different overrides and things that you could allow certain people selectively to, greater flexibility. So yeah, just a reminder. So so likewise on the accounting period side, right, it really will move in a similar way, subject to those constraints. But just a reminder that you're going to want to advance the period. And just as a side note, in my example here, I have only to 2020. It's pretty common that you would have maybe certainly a year, maybe a couple of years forward already defined in your calendar for perhaps budgeting, forecasting purposes, that kind of thing. So in that case, we would have set the new current year on the screen we were just in. And then based on that new current year designation, we would designate the current period of that year for the system here, right? So pretty common. You're already doing this in your month-end routines, but just a reminder. Now, if you don't see the new year that you're looking for, let me go back. You can, if you're in a single site environment, it may be just as simple as adding the new year and defining it here. If you're in a multi-site type environment, you might want to check with your IT administration and get a clear understanding of the hierarchy and how you're set. You may have to set that up at a higher level and push it down to this one, but whatever the flow of it needs to be based on your structure, but you would then make sure to set the accounting period here. Okay. Now, just a side note, if you're on some of the newer versions, I think version 10 has this new status feature, this new status column for each period, which is very cool. And so it gives you a nice distinct ability to just, boom, mark a period closed. So you can just flag it closed, right? Kind of similar, like we know we could flag the year closed previously, but this gives me the ability to just distinctly close the period. Or I can leave it in what it calls a, quote, adjusting state, which basically then follows the same kind of permissions rules that you're already accustomed to. Okay, but just a reminder. So that's the benefit of the newer versions. You have that nice feature there available to you as well, just as a reminder. Okay.
So question came in here, allowable days forward, backward used to prevent posting transactions outside of an accounting period. It's a good question. I believe it does.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're going to try and post something from last month or something, you either have to have out of period permissions or the, days forward and backward.
Right.
Be outside that.
Right. Yeah. Now the system, from a form level, they might be in the form and call it enter the transaction or fill out the form, if you will, and put the date and whatnot, and but they're not going to be able to transact it and go forward with it.
Got it. Cool. Okay.
So year-end closing journal entries. So this one is a new step, right? So this would be an additional step that we obviously want to do at year end that we don't do at other times in the year. And so this is, as we see from the description here, this utility generates fiscal year and journal transactions to close out all your revenue and expense accounts into an income summary account, right? So this is going to update retained earnings with your year-to-date results. And really what it first asks for is a target journal. So you're going to give it a journal to reference. It's typically something like what I have here, year end, or you know, whatever name is meaningful to you, but something like that, and give it also a target retained earnings or a target equity account that you're gonna close.
I believe that when you do the drop down of that account, that has to be an account type of retained earnings, right?
Of owner's equity, yes. Yeah,
Owner's
so
equity.
it's
Sorry.
going to typically be some kind of, yes, some kind of equity account. It's typically retained earnings, but yeah, and it's going to show you the description of the one that you chose. So the fiscal year is going to be designated there, so make sure you're in the right fiscal year. You have the choice whether you want to include or exclude unit code detail. And then when you process that, it's really going to generate a journal entry, and it's going to create it and drop it into this journal that you designated here, and it's then available for you to review and post just like any other system journal.
So it's going to create more than one journal entry, right? It's going to, all of your income statement accounts are going to get zeroed, right? And then it'll summarize that into retained earnings.
Right. Yeah. So collectively, I mean, it's really call it a very big, potentially a very big journal entry. But it is really just one entry, one event, right? At which time it totals up those things and generates the offset to retained earnings. Now, the nice thing is the system's really flexible in that you could run this again if needed. So if I have zeroed out my P&L, for example, and yet now I've got some adjusting entries I need to do or forgot to do or whatnot, and I've hit the P&L again, right? So I basically need to run that again. So if you run this again, it will pick up then just the incremental changes that are needed.
Okay, so I can do this over and over again, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
It's not gonna hurt you to run it. It's actually very, very flexible. Okay. All right. So that would be an example of obviously a new activity, right? A new process that perhaps you haven't done in the course of month end, right? That you want to pay attention to.
So
Okay.
Is that it?
So that's really it. Yeah, that's it for the kind of what I'll call the more flexible ones, right? So these are the ones we've been talking about here, right? So that shouldn't keep you up too much at night. And then as we go forward, we'll look at the next ones on the list are under a broad heading of what I'll call more maintenance or performance minded or considerations. So some of these, if you're new on the system this year, or these might be things you don't have to consider for a long time. But again, as a point of reference, it's a good time to at least review and certainly understand that they're there, but perhaps review them and take stock of them and see if you do need to address anything. So on the AR side, things like purging invoice history, right? Am I retaining too much detail in the system? And I should say too, as we go through these these might be part of a larger conversation that you might have with others in your organization or on your team. It could, dovetail into your company's record retention, policies and data governance and things like that. But and so it might not be, a choice that you make by yourself, but when and if that issue comes up, right, these are the kind of areas that are available to you to monitor the level of detail in the system. So purging invoice history, do I need to address or modify anything there? AR posted transactions, do I have, am I carrying too much weight, too much detail, right, in my AR posted transactions? Are things slowing down? Am I at a point where I want to begin purging out some of that historical data? Customer orders, right? So this might be a good example where you would talk this over with, let's say, for example, your head of customer service or order entry, that type of thing. How much history do you guys want to keep in the system, for reference? And anyway, so this utility will allow you to kind of set those thresholds as well. I think on the packing slip side, there's one as well to purge out packing slip register reports that are generated as well. So, okay, so collectively, just some tools that are available to you to help you manage level of detail in the system on the AR side.
So Byron, just that whole list of the optional stuff is primarily like record management, either, in these particular cases, deleting or purging, or maybe archiving. You can change orders to history, things like that. The reason you do that is really to get better performance maybe, or shorter reports or things like that. It's really kind of a performance and disk-based thing usually, right?
It is, and some of these things are historically rooted in more in a size constraint of disk space on the system. That's become less and less of an issue nowadays. But if there is some compelling reason that you need to reduce the footprint of the system, these are things that are available to you if needed.
Yeah, and that is kind of a good point that, this product, SyteLine, Cymix, CSI, has been around a long time. And, a lot of these things came from back in the day when, you had, a 200 megabyte drive, and that was it. So you really did need to worry about space or, indexing files and performance, stuff like that. And now with, cheap storage and solid state drive, that fewer and fewer customers are actually deleting anything.
Yeah, and my first choice would be to retain as much as I reasonably can in the system. I would hold on to as much detail as we can manage and kind of tolerate, working through from a performance standpoint. So, but if it becomes compelling and you need to look at it, these are things to consider. Now, other thing I wanted to also mention, just as a consideration instead of, or as an alternative perhaps to purging transactions is deactivating them, right? So there is a feature both on the AR and the AP side we'll look at in a minute to set a flag which really designates whether a record is active or inactive, and really the impact of it is kind of helpful and will impact screens like this. So AR posted transaction detail, maybe an AR posted summary, and you may have seen these little fields referenced here and not really either paid much attention or kind of understood like how it kind of relates. But from a performance standpoint, what you can do is flag these things basically inactive, and it kind of gets them off the front burner, if you will, or off the initial load of the form.
Like
right?
that, they would preclude it from hitting the customer statements when I ran them if they were inactive, right?
Yeah, and it gives you the ability downstream as well to, with reporting different reports, you could then choose active, inactive, et cetera. So just another option to help and perhaps help with performance without having to actually go to the step of purging records out, right?
Yeah.
So just something to consider. On the AP side, just real quickly, right, we have the ability to look at our retention kind of policy and level on purchase orders, right? So again,
Byron, sorry, a question came in. Once the transactions have been purged, can you go back and look at a particular transaction included in the purge? So a lot of these utilities, if and when you purge them, come with a report that's actually going to, print that you can archive. Some of the things like what he just talked about with deactivating things, you can set up audit trails on that, but for the most part, yeah, I don't think there's a transaction history on that. But yeah, I think, for the most part, people really don't purge too much anymore. They, on this one, it says, purchase order must have been moved to a status of H for history. A lot of these things can go out to history and they get them out of your main PO file, but they're still in the system. Now, any transactions that happen with any of these guys, receipts and issues, that stays in the material transaction file, which is another one that you could, do maintenance on as well. But yeah, it's most of the purge utilities will actually create a report when you do it. Hey, Byron, we're getting close to the top of the hour. I'm wondering maybe we go through any ones that are notable through here that we might want to.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so just real quickly, on the payable side, right? We saw you've got these similar kind of areas, and they're on the list that we can send you, right? That you can consider if needed. And then, of course, you have, as I mentioned, the active, deactive on the AP side as well, right? Which is going to give you a similar kind of flag on AP posted transactions and things like that. So it's actually pretty forgiving, and it doesn't delete records or purge them. It just kind of flags them one way or the other. So might be something to consider trying and see if it's helpful for you. On the payroll side, obviously, if you're retaining, too much historical payroll data. So just real quick, physical inventory, the small topic of physical inventory. Sometimes we get questions about the procedure, the process for that, and so I wanted to just mention this form, the physical inventory navigation, actually provides a nice visual step-by-step process flow of the steps for a physical inventory from the system standpoint, right? So walking you through an entire physical inventory is more than we can cover in an event like this today, but right, because there's a lot of off-system kind of details and processes you need to make sure that you're covering and housekeeping and all of those kinds of things. But from a system standpoint, you can refer to this one. It gives you a nice checklist to follow. Deleting material transactions, as Tim mentioned, right? You might want to look at this one at some point in time. This one tends to be one of the largest files in the system, and nice thing is you can get real granular with the levels that you care to purge and retain. So if needed, that's a good one to consider. And then just the additional minor little thing of rolling your current costs to standard costs. So right, so that's probably likewise part of a a larger conversation, but in this moment, just a simple reminder, to make sure to address that based on your structure and your organization. But that's something that typically gets addressed this time of year as well. So on the job side, likewise, we have different utilities to update and change job statuses. I'm just going to go through these relatively quickly here. Delete job transactions. Again, how much or little do you want to retain?
And this one, I might point out with the job transactions, this is one of those files that's out there that, depending on, your shop floor, can end up being huge. But the data in the posted job transactions really is, I've not found many customers who have found, a whole lot of use in that, because a lot of what happens because of a job transaction gets pushed out to material transactions and other places. So this is one of those possible, good benefit to get rid of it, and little impact in getting rid of it. Usually, a lot of customers only keep a year of this.
Okay. Good point. So on the GL side, there's a utility when and if you need it that will help compress some of the detail out of the GL and roll it up to shrink the size. Again, if that's ideally, you would probably want to retain as much as you can, but if it's needed, this is here as well. It walks you through a couple different choices of the compression level that you want, whether at the account level or your reporting unit and by date or period, et cetera. But that's one to consider. I would probably, definitely make sure you not only have reports, but ideally like a data file backup of it. Get, if possible, get IT to download that or set that aside for you, so you make sure you have that as a reference.
So just on this thing, compressing it, it allows you to keep the ability to do your P&L and your financial statements forever. But what happens is right now a GL transaction gets linked right to a material transaction. Like I can go back and find the source of that, the vendor, the part number. When you do this transaction, you're kind of taking a bunch of like accounts, like for this account, unit code for a period, and it summarizes into one. So you lose all that data that you usually you need for doing audits and problem solving. So this, a lot of times, they'll wait, the 7 years of, reporting standards before we really kind of do that. Or, there's other things. I think you can do this for, for particular types of files, like your job, or, a lot of transactions there will get, a whole lot of minutia about fixed labor, overhead, blah, blah, blah. So you can do it for accounts like that, where I really am not going to look at the detail of that and keep the detail on the other accounts that you want to.
Right. Yeah. So this activity is not going to change your financial results or your financial totals. It's just going to basically compress the detail out of them and summarize it, right? So that you still have it for reporting, financial reporting purposes, but may not be as helpful, for like a discovery or investigative standpoint after you get the detail out of it. Okay.
Got it.
Okay, so that was again just back to our checklist, right? These were the guys we were kind of focused on, and just if nothing else as a point of reference, right? That hey, Byron was talking about those that list of other stuff. I didn't need any of that until now. Where do I find that? What was that called? So it can just at least serve as a point of reference. And yeah, so again, overall, just kind of the top priority list, things that are time sensitive, your middle of the list stuff that's a little more flexible, but make sure you cover those bases, and then optional stuff for you to consider really at any time in the system as needed, but something to look at. So, and if we have any questions, I was trying to leave more time for questions, but really appreciate everybody's time and focus with us. And yeah, we're here to help. So if we can assist with any of these, as you have, we're happy.
And again, we'll send out the recording for this that you can get to afterwards, and any kind of checklist that Byron showed.
Yeah, well. I think Heather mentioned at the opening the email address. I believe it's info@aitbusiness.com. You can send us an email. We're happy to share that document with you if it can help you on your journey.
Before we quit, any other questions? All right.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking the time to go through and share this information today. And thank you everyone else for attending. As Byron and Tim mentioned, the recording will be made available after the session. And if you'd like to join us for future Lunch and Learn series sessions, we have our next topic on Tuesday, December 15th, which is just a couple days away. We'd love for you guys to join us, and if you'd like to receive invitations for those sessions, you can either do that by signing up in our Learning Center, or you can send an email to that info@aitbusiness.com, and I'll make sure that you get added to the list. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great week.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.